Have you ever wished, just for a moment, that your mind would finally be quiet? Not because something terrible happened, not because your life was falling apart, but because you were simply exhausted from thinking. You replay conversations long after they're over. You notice tiny changes in people's voices. You see problems before anyone else does. You ask questions that nobody around you seems interested in asking. And sometimes, you wonder if life would actually be easier if you just didn't notice so much. Maybe you've watched a group of people laughing together, while your own mind was busy analyzing why the conversation felt forced. Maybe someone told you you're overthinking it, not because you were wrong, but because they had already stopped thinking about it. There's a strange kind of loneliness that comes from seeing too much. It's difficult to explain. You don't feel smarter than everyone else. You don't even want to. You just can't seem to stop noticing things that other people easily ignore. The awkward pause, the fake smile, the hidden tension, the contradiction nobody wants to talk about. And after a while, you begin asking yourself a dangerous question. Would I be happier if I simply knew less? The writer Ernest Hemingway once said, "Happiness in intelligent people is the rarest thing I know." Whether that statement is completely true isn't the point. The reason it continues to resonate with millions of people is because it captures a feeling. The feeling that awareness often comes with a price. We usually think intelligence makes life easier. Better decisions, better careers, better relationships, better outcomes. But the human brain wasn't designed only to solve problems. It was also designed to protect us. And sometimes, those two jobs begin working against each other. The more patterns your brain detects, the more potential threats it sees, the more possibilities it imagines, the more uncertainty it creates, the more deeply it understands the world, the harder it becomes to simply exist inside it. Imagine watching the same movie as everyone else. Most people enjoy the story. They laugh, they cry, they become immersed in the experience. But you're constantly noticing the camera angles, the lighting, the editing, the symbolism, the hidden meaning behind every line. By the time the movie ends, you've analyzed everything, except whether you actually enjoyed it. Life can start feeling exactly the same. You stop experiencing moments because you're busy interpreting them. You stop living inside conversations because you're analyzing every sentence. You stop enjoying success because your mind is already calculating everything that could go wrong next. Psychologists often refer to this tendency as overanalysis. But that word doesn't happening, because this isn't simply thinking too much. It's a brain that refuses to stop searching for patterns. Every situation becomes another puzzle. Every relationship becomes another mystery. Every decision becomes another simulation. What if this happens? What if I'm missing something? What if there's a better choice? At first, this feels like a strength, and sometimes, it truly is. Being observant can help you avoid manipulation. Being thoughtful can help you make wiser decisions. Seeing patterns can help you solve problems that others completely miss. These are real advantages. But every strength has a shadow, and awareness is no exception, because the same brain that protects you from making mistakes also protects you from feeling peace. Instead of allowing yourself to enjoy the present, it quietly pulls you toward every possible future, every possible failure, every possible disappointment. Your body is sitting in a peaceful cafe, but your mind is already living through tomorrow's worst-case scenario. This is why highly aware people often describe themselves in surprisingly similar ways. I can't switch my brain off. I notice everything. I wish I could stop thinking. Those aren't signs of weakness. They's constantly scanning for information. The problem isn't that your mind is broken. The problem is that your mind never believes its job is finished. And eventually, that constant awareness creates something many people never expect. Not wisdom, not confidence, but exhaustion. Not because life became harder, but because your brain never stopped trying to solve it. And that exhaustion slowly changes the way you experience happiness itself. Because happiness doesn't only require understanding. Sometimes, it requires letting go of the need to understand everything. And for people who are deeply aware, that may be one of the hardest things they'll ever learn. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt that something was off? Nobody said anything. Nobody looked upset. Everything seemed completely normal. But somehow, you could feel the tension. Most people would ignore it. 5 minutes later, they'd be laughing and enjoying themselves. But your brain doesn't let it go. It starts collecting evidence. Their smile looked forced. They stopped making eye contact. Something must have happened before I got here. Before you know it, you're no longer part of the moment. You're investigating it. This is one of the hidden costs of heightened awareness. Your brain doesn't simply experience reality. It constantly interprets it. Psychologists often describe the human brain as a prediction machine. It's always trying to answer one question: what happens next? For most people, those predictions stay relatively simple. But for highly aware individuals, the possibilities multiply. Every small signal creates another branch. Every branch creates another outcome. Every outcome creates another possibility. A simple text message becomes, "Why did they only reply with one word? Did I say something wrong? Maybe they're busy. Or maybe they're losing interest. Or maybe I'm reading too much into it." Your mind doesn't settle on one explanation. It simulates all of them. That's exhausting. Not because any one thought is overwhelming, but because they never arrive alone. It's like opening 20 browser tabs every time something happens. Individually, none of them are a problem. Together, they slow everything down. Here's something interesting. Highly aware people aren't always more negative. They're often just more complete. They don't only imagine the best outcome. They imagine every outcome. Their brains automatically scan for patterns that other people simply don't notice. That ability can be incredibly useful. It helps them solve difficult problems. It helps them recognize manipulation. It helps them avoid mistakes. But the same skill also makes uncertainty feel much heavier. Because awareness doesn't stop at possibilities. It keeps asking, what does this mean? What does that say about me? What does that say about the future? Eventually, your own thoughts become louder than reality itself. This is why so many overthinkers struggle to enjoy simple moments. Imagine you're sitting with friends at dinner. Everyone else is enjoying the conversation, but your attention drifts. You start wondering whether you talked too much earlier. Then you notice someone checking their phone. You wonder if they're bored. A few minutes later, someone laughs. Not at you, just laughs. And somehow, your brain still asks, was that about me? Objectively, nothing happened. Emotionally, everything happened. This constant mental activity also changes the way highly aware people connect with others. They often feel misunderstood. Not because people dislike them, but because explaining their thoughts feels impossible. How do you explain something that happened entirely inside your own mind? How do you describe a feeling that came from noticing 10 tiny details nobody else even saw? Eventually, many people stop trying. They smile. They nod. They say, "I'm fine." Not because they are, because explaining it feels more exhausting than staying quiet. And over time, that silence creates distance. Not just from other people, from themselves. One of the greatest ironies of awareness is that it can make you feel deeply connected to humanity, while simultaneously making you feel completely alone. You notice suffering everywhere. You feel the weight of other people's emotions. You recognize the fears hidden behind confidence, the loneliness behind success, the sadness behind someone's smile. But when it are feeling, the words never seem big enough, so you carry it alone. This is why awareness can slowly become isolation. Not because intelligent people don't enjoy relationships, but because they often struggle to find conversations that feel real. Small talk isn't difficult. It's just unsatisfying. You don't want to talk about the weather. You want to talk about why people hide behind confidence, why loneliness exists in crowded cities, why some memories refuse to disappear, why happiness feels so temporary. Those are the conversations your mind naturally wants to have. But most days, the world moves too quickly to stop for questions like those. So you begin adapting. You laugh when everyone else laughs. You keep your deeper thoughts to yourself. You become easier to be around. But inside, something slowly starts disappearing. Curiosity becomes silence. Honesty becomes performance. Connection becomes observation. And perhaps that's the loneliest part of all. Not that nobody understands you, but that you slowly stop believing anyone could. Eventually, something strange begins to happen. The questions get bigger. At first, you're analyzing conversations, then relationships, then yourself. But if your mind never stops searching for patterns, it eventually turns toward the biggest questions of all. Why are we here? Why do people chase success if nothing lasts forever? Why does happiness disappear so quickly? What is all of this actually for? These aren't unusual questions. Almost everyone asks them at some point. The difference is, most people eventually move on. Highly aware people often don't. Their minds refuse to let the question go until it finds an answer. The problem is, some questions don't have one. Or at least, not the kind of answer the brain is looking for. This is where awareness quietly transforms into something much heavier. Not sadness, not depression, something deeper, existential exhaustion. It'd been searching for certainty in a place where certainty doesn't exist. And that's an impossible task. Imagine standing in front of the ocean, trying to count every wave before allowing yourself to enjoy the beach. You never will. Yet that's exactly how many highly aware people approach life. I'll relax once I understand everything. I'll feel happy once everything finally makes sense. I'll enjoy life after I figure life out. But life doesn't work that way. Meaning isn't something you discover like buried treasure. It's something you create. And that idea can be incredibly frustrating to a mind that loves certainty. Because creating meaning feels subjective, temporary, almost fake. Your brain immediately pushes back. But if I made it up, does it really matter? This is where many people become trapped. Every answer creates another question. Every solution creates another doubt. Every moment of peace gets interrupted by another thought. What if this isn't enough? What if none of this actually matters? Over time, your own intelligence begins arguing against your own happiness. The very ability that helps you see through illusions also makes it difficult to believe in hope. Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. Not because they were weak, because they were deeply aware. The more honestly you examine existence, the more you realize how much remains unknowable. And for some people, that realization becomes terrifying. For others, it becomes freedom. Here's the difference. Some people see uncertainty and think, nothing matters. Others see the exact same uncertainty and think, I'm free to decide what matters. The world doesn't change. Only the interpretation does. This might be one of the most important psychological shifts a person can ever make. Because awareness itself isn't the source of suffering. Attachment is. Attachment to certainty. Attachment to complete understanding. Attachment to having every answer before you're allowed to feel at peace. Think about children for a moment. Children ask endless questions. But once they receive an answer, they run back to playing. Adults often do the opposite. We keep asking, keep analyzing, keep searching, until we forget to actually live. Highly aware people are especially vulnerable to this trap. Not because they're more intelligent, but because their minds have become so good at solving problems. They begin treating life itself like one. Except life was never meant to be solved. It was meant to be experienced. And that may be the hardest lesson awareness ever has to learn. You don't need to understand every emotion before feeling it. You don't need to explain every beautiful sunset before enjoying it. You don't need to solve existence before allowing yourself to smile. Your mind may always search for deeper meaning. That's part of who you are. But perhaps meaning was never hiding behind another answer. Perhaps it has been quietly waiting inside the moments your mind keeps rushing past. Because awareness becomes a gift only when it finally learns the difference between observing life and actually living it. So, does this mean awareness is a curse? Not at all. In fact, it may be one of the greatest gifts a person can have. But only when you stop asking it to do a job it was never meant to do. Awareness can help you see patterns. It can protect you from manipulation. It can help you understand people more deeply. It can inspire incredible creativity. But awareness cannot tell you how to live. That's a choice. For years, many people believe that if they just think hard enough, they'll finally arrive at a life where nothing hurts. Nothing feels uncertain. Nothing feels confusing. But that's not wisdom. That's perfectionism wearing the mask of intelligence. Life isn't difficult because there are questions. Life becomes difficult when we believe every question must have an answer. The truth is, your mind will never run out of things to analyze. If it solves one problem, it will immediately create another. That's simply what healthy brains do. They're prediction machines. They're pattern detectors. They're always looking for the next thing to understand. The goal isn't to stop thinking. It isn't even possible. The goal is learning when thinking is no longer helping. There's an old saying in psychology: what you resist, persists. the harder you try to eliminate uncertainty, the more uncertainty begins controlling your life. Ironically, peace doesn't come from finally understanding everything. It comes from becoming comfortable with not understanding everything. That doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting yourself enough to stop demanding certainty before you're allowed to live. Highly aware people often spend years searching for the perfect explanation, the perfect philosophy, the perfect purpose, the perfect life. But perfection is another pattern your brain invented. Life has never required perfection, only participation. Think about your favorite memory. Maybe it was a conversation that lasted until sunrise, a road trip, quiet walk, a cup of coffee with someone you loved. At the time, you probably weren't analyzing why it mattered. You were simply there, fully present. And only later did your mind begin trying to explain why it felt so meaningful. The experience came first. The explanation came later. Somewhere along the way, many of us accidentally reversed that order. We began waiting for life to make sense before allowing ourselves to live it. But life has always worked the other way around. You live first. Meaning comes later. You experience first. Understanding follows. Perhaps that's the real cost of being too aware. Not that you think too much, but that you sometimes think instead of living. And perhaps that's also the way forward. Not by becoming less intelligent. Not by pretending not to notice what you notice, but by remembering that awareness is a tool, not a home. You were never meant to live inside your thoughts forever. You were meant to visit them, learn from them, and then return to the world. Return to conversations. Return to laughter. Return to music. Return to sunlight. Return to people. Return to the ordinary moments your mind keeps trying to solve. Because one day, those ordinary moments will quietly become the memories you treasure most. So if your mind feels exhausted, if you've spent years trying to understand everything, maybe today isn't the day to find another answer. Maybe today is simply the day to watch the sunset without explaining it, to listen to music without analyzing it, to enjoy someone's company without wondering how long it will last. Not because your questions disappeared, but because, for one beautiful moment, you finally gave yourself permission to stop asking them. Awareness doesn't have to steal your happiness. It only becomes dangerous when it convinces you that understanding life is more important than living it. And perhaps that's the greatest paradox of all. The people who see the world most clearly are often the ones who must remember to close their eyes every once in a while, not to escape reality, but to finally experience it.